Let's think back to the year 2004. If you were like me as a 7-year-old, you were probably relaxing, eating a bowl of Koala Crisp cereal, and watching an episode of that new up-and-coming show, Drake and Josh, and thinking to yourself, I'm late for Jackson's birthday party! Back then, usually our parties mostly consisted of playing Mario Party on the GameCube and riding scooters and whatnot, but I'll never forget when one of my friends showed us all this new handheld game system he got, the Nintendo DS. Up until that point, I had been playing my Game Boy Advance all the time, and when I heard that this new device could play GBA games but with a backlight so I could actually see what I was playing, I was immediately on board. Now, the DS's launch was interesting to say the least. Nintendo's marketing team decided to go with a more risky approach, and the launch titles look like the bargain bin at your local Walmart. The DS did launch with 2 dating sim games, so I guess that did fit with their branding at the time. However, there was one game at launch that everybody wanted. Super Mario 64 DS. Now, I actually didn't grow up with a Nintendo 64. My siblings and I played a whole lot of GameCube growing up, but all of my experience with games like Mario Kart 64, Mario Party 1 and 2, and Donkey Kong 64 was over at friends' houses. Super Mario 64 is also included in that list. I played it at my friend's house and absolutely loved it, but never owned it for myself until much later. But on one fateful Christmas, my brother and I both opened a new DS and a copy of Super Mario 64 DS. Now, we all know that Super Mario 64 DS has aged about as poorly as Chuck Norris jokes. Well, maybe not that poorly. It still looks pretty good for a handheld game in the early 2000s, but the control scheme was definitely less than ideal. Using a D-pad to control in a 3D space was never all that great, and using the touchscreen was even worse. However, the fact that you could play as not just Mario, but also Luigi, Wario, and even Yoshi in a 3D game was like a dream come true for a young Mario fan. I remember thinking it was so cool that each character had specific stars that only they could get, and they all had unique abilities that really shook the gameplay up. Now, as a 23-year-old man, I recognize that this game kind of has DK64 backtracking syndrome, but you gotta understand that the young me was just so happy to play a new 3D Mario game. But in terms of new content, SM64 DS didn't add much to the main game. It added 20 new stars, a handful of new stages, some new power-ups, and this new drawing feature that I mostly ignored since I got a needs improvement in art class. There was also this Versus mode that my brothers and I got way more mileage out of than Nintendo probably ever intended, but there was one other mode that I put way more hours into. The Rec Room is a room that you come across pretty early on in the game. A toad is vibing in a room with a bunch of shelves, and he asks you to catch a bunch of bunnies and return the keys that they stole from him. Every bunny that you catch will unlock a new minigame in the Rec Room, which were all designed to display the value of touch-based gaming. And let me tell you, these minigames were incredible. Each of the characters had their own genre of minigame. Yoshi's were puzzle-based, likely a reference to his appearance in various puzzle games like Yoshi's Cookie and Tetris Attack. Mario's were more action-based because he's obviously the action platforming icon. Wario's were just kind of all over the place because his character was just kind of all over the place. And Luigi's were casino-themed because Luigi canonically has a gambling problem or something? Ironically, when this game got re-released on the Virtual Console, it was rated PEGI 12 in Europe because of his minigames. Regardless, these minigames had no business being as fun as they were. I remember sinking so much time into Bob-omb Squad, Coincentration, Connect the Characters, Wanted, and tons of other minigames in this collection. Luigi actually taught me how to play poker, and I vividly remember one day when my mom asked me where I learned to play poker, and my response was, Luigi.
Yo!
But this was back when the DS was first getting its start, so unfortunately I only knew a small handful of people who had played these minigames before. I'd have to wait for a few years to see these minigames truly move into the limelight. Super Mario 64 DS was a pretty successful game, selling over 11 million copies. However, Nintendo knew that these touch-based minigames were too good to be kept onto just one DS game, so they were also included with a game most DS owners are familiar with: New Super Mario Bros. This is the best-selling game on the DS, and it's understandable because it's an incredibly fun platformer. I understand that currently we're all really sick of the New Super Mario Bros. Formula, but at the time, this game was a breath of fresh air into the 2D platforming genre. However, included in this game was another collection of touch-based minigames, including a bunch of new minigames and an all-new versus battle mode. This meant that we could play these minigames with 4 friends over DS Download Play, and only one person needed the game to do it. I have such fond memories of playing these games with family and friends. We'd all bring our DS's to family functions and birthday parties and have a great time playing Bob-omb Reverse, Snowball Slam, and tons of other minigames. And since almost everyone I knew had a DS and even potentially a copy of New Super Mario Bros., it was super easy to get a group together to play. The magic of these minigames was that they were super easy to understand thanks to the touch controls, and they were just little bites of fun that you could really grind for a high score. It was like having a Mario-themed arcade on your DS, and I look back to it very fondly. Now, in 2020, people don't really carry their DSs around anymore. I mean, if you were to go into a coffee shop, sit down, and wait in a PictoChat room, you'd have a hard time finding somebody to send drawings to. However, we all currently have our phones strapped to us wherever we go. Whether we need it for work, to contact loved ones, to post updates about our lives to social media, or to even order a burger to our front doorstep. Nintendo also has a lucrative business in the mobile gaming market, but unfortunately, their mobile games are just okay. Mario Kart Tour was kind of underwhelming in my personal opinion. It just felt like the game was playing itself for the majority of my playtime, and there were so many paywalls that I stopped playing after very long. Nintendo's mobile games, in my opinion, lack longevity and a strong multiplayer or communal aspect. This is where these minigames come in. Many consumers are beginning to become nostalgic for the 2000s, especially on the internet, as we all tackle adulthood and leave our childhoods behind. Nintendo was a huge part of a lot of 20-somethings' childhood, and we're all beginning to become nostalgic for those simpler times on the GameCube, Game Boy Advance, and DS. And since New Super Mario Bros. Was the best-selling game on the best-selling handheld of all time, now seems like a perfect time to bring these minigames that people loved onto mobile devices. Imagine being able to play these touch-based minigames on your phone wherever and whenever you want. Nintendo could add an online leaderboard to allow you to compete with people's high scores, and maybe even a friends feature so that you can beat your friends' scores and brag about it to them. Also, imagine if there was a feature to play the Versus minigames online with your friends. Being able to just take out your phones at a get-together and immediately start playing some of these minigames would be an excellent way to not only spread awareness about your game through word of mouth, but it would also capitalize on the growing market of mobile phone-based party games that games like Words with Friends, Trivia Crack, and even Jackbox games have capitalized on recently. These games could become a huge hit at parties and gatherings. The reason I titled this video, Nintendo is sitting on a nostalgic goldmine, is for more than just clickbait. Nintendo has a nostalgic pull that most companies frankly don't have. Their games have stuck with people for years and are consistently praised throughout generations for both their modern and classic software. However, Nintendo seems to think that people are only nostalgic for their first 2 consoles. While many people have a fondness for games like Super Mario Bros., Zelda 1, Super Metroid, and even Super Mario World, as time passes, more of Nintendo's games become nostalgic for their consistently growing fanbase. Nintendo doesn't seem to understand that a lot of young adults aren't as nostalgic for NES Mario games as they are for Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, or New Super Mario Bros. Nintendo seems to be reluctant to re-release their content from the 2000s, which is strange because now is absolutely a prime time to do so. Now, Nintendo has delivered legacy content to an extent. The Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection on Switch is the most recent example of this, and to be honest, it's what also makes me a bit worried if Nintendo were to actually go through with this idea. You see, Nintendo was always a company I respected because they seemed to understand how to run a business built off of creatives. Nintendo never released games that were half-finished or didn't fulfill the artist's vision. Shigeru Miyamoto famously stated that a delayed game is eventually good, but a rush game is forever bad. They understood that if you want to sell art in both the short term and the long term, you need to allow your creatives to have the space and time that they need to deliver a product that will stick with people. They didn't sell us a half-baked game with $60 DLC later. They delayed it and endured losses in their release schedule to ensure that they delivered the best art possible. But lately, it feels like that focus has shifted. From Mario Kart Tour including so many pay-to-win features and Mario 3D All-Stars being a full-price collection of simple ports featuring a limited time availability to create scarcity and incentivize people to buy, Nintendo seems to really be shifting their focus towards profit, which is understandable. However, they've been making some pretty anti-consumer moves lately that I really hope wouldn't spill over into this potential idea. I know businesses obviously need to make money, so it's not like I'm expecting this game to be free or anything. What if the game had a few minigames available for free, but then to get all of them you need to pay the full price like in Super Mario Run? Or what if the app itself was free, but there was an in-game shop like Rusty's Real Deal Baseball, run by a Toad or a Shy Guy that allowed you to purchase each minigame and maybe even haggle on price? This could be a creative and charming way to get people excited about each individual minigame in the collection. There are plenty of routes that Nintendo could take with this game that would be reasonable and would keep fans happy, while still providing a sustainable profit. These minigames are a nostalgic oddity in Nintendo's library, and a bit of a treasure chest of hidden gems in a lot of ways. It seems like a lot of people have fond memories of these games, but digging up their DS is a less than ideal way to play them. A mobile game would be the perfect way to bring these genius minigames into the next generation. Nintendo, you're sitting on a goldmine of untapped 2000s nostalgia.